I mean, to be a race car driver, win races, the crowd going nuts, like 100,000 people cheering your name. Wow. And so that's for me how my dream was born.
What are you more jealous of? Wife taking another man or Lewis Hamilton when he won?
Probably Lewis Hamilton.
So you win that title and then you decide to retire. Why?
It was the perfect exit.
Was it everything you expected it to be?
More. Oh my goodness, that is madness. Oh, the Sunday night party was massive. I was flying. Maybe you can blend in some pictures. I was flying.
Next chapter.
Yeah.
What was that discovery phase around? This is what I want to do, and I want to create Rosberg Ventures.
So with Rosberg Ventures now, what we're doing is essentially we're building fund of funds. The best way to have exposure to the VC asset class is to diversify into the top tier funds of the world.
Who's the best driver you think you drove with?
No, I don't like that topic.
Right.
So what an honor. I have the pleasure of being with 2 stabbings in one go. Like, come on, seriously. That's spectacular, no?
And normally we say thank you so much for joining us, but like we're grateful to you for hosting. This is so exciting to be on tour with my bro.
This is a new level of introductions.
And is it a discovery of Monaco for you guys, or you've been here before?
I've been here once before, but he hasn't.
Well, no, we came when we were young, when we were very young, but we were staying just outside of Nice. So we moved in for a day and spent kind of a day. We actually went out on a boat, which was really nice.
Okay, super yacht.
I haven't been, no.
I hear there are LPs.
First one on tour.
There are LPs.
So, yeah, you say that. I am fundraising for something we're going to be speaking about later, and actually 0 so far from Monaco. I'm not too sure yet.
I should leave the fund back at
To
home.
be confirmed. In theory, there should be a lot of money here, but to be confirmed.
Now, let's dive in. Just want to start on some origins. When we think about the entry into racing and the love that was inspired, can you just take us to that? Where the love came from and when that really catalyzes, this is what I have to do.
So for those of you watching who don't know, my father was a Formula One driver himself. And he won the Formula One World Championship actually in 1982. And then when I was born in 1985, he was still racing in like touring cars and things. And so I would really go to the races with my mom, and seriously, that was like the dream. Yeah, I mean, to be a race car driver, win races, the crowd going nuts, like 100,000 people cheering your name. Wow. And so that's for me how my dream was born. But of course, it was something that was totally unrealistic. Like, am I going to be able to do something so good and drive so well? Totally unrealistic. But the dream was there. I want to do that too one day.
How did it work when you were then speaking with your dad about it, and when it came to discussions of you actually taking it up as a sport? Was he encouraging?
So because for him also it was his biggest passion in life was to drive race cars. And so he actually built a little go-kart track in the garden in Ibiza. Very modest backgrounds I come from, obviously. But okay, can
Embrace it.
Yeah, embrace it. So there was a little go-kart track in the garden in Ibiza. And so from the age of 4, he had built it already for him and his friends. And from the age of 4, then he had a 2-seater. So I was doing the steering wheel, he was doing throttle and accelerator. I remember I drove it straight into the bush because he was going way too fast. He was not too happy about that. But that's the beginnings, really. And he was very supportive, yeah, because for him also it was a great father-son activity to do.
So it was always fun. You never felt like it was something that you were expected to do?
No, it was always enjoyable, yeah, certainly, yeah. But of course, there was also the element of pressure coming at quite an early age because of the name that I had. So I would come to the racetrack and all the kids, I would stand there and maybe they wouldn't know who I was, but they would know the name. So they would be talking, hey, Rosberg is racing, we need to beat him. So all the kids were always making a big thing about needing to definitely be in front of me. So the pressure was there from a very early age, yeah.
When you were young, what did that look like in terms of how often you raced, how often your dad took you to the track? And I'm just intrigued in kind of the makings of a champion, what it takes in those early years.
Well, it really takes a lot of dedication from a very young age. Started racing, I was 10, and it's every Saturday on the go-karting track, and every other weekend was a race. And a race is usually starting from Thursday to Sunday. So I also missed a lot of school. So it was a lot of traveling always around France. It was the French championship first, then Italian championship. So it's quite a big dedication, yeah. And my father actually joined me for every step of the way at that point in time. So it was a big like father-son activity, which was great, but also sometimes not so easy because he was someone who did expect also for me to arrive with like dedication.
I'm always intrigued by the accessibility of the sport. because when you're playing football and you're at school or similar, you know, it's something you do as a team and it's part of a curriculum type. Yeah. But as you've just kind of highlighted to an extent, it almost separated you from that. How many children were competing at that time with you? Was it the same circuit of young?
No, it's a lot, but of course accessibility is a big negative in our sports, yeah. In saying that though, if the parents are fully committed and the son has that special talent, most people will be able to somehow break through, because buying a go-kart is not so crazy expensive. Doing some of the club racing with your trailer, you know, and the dad is the mechanic, is also somehow doable, and that's how Lewis Hamilton started, and many other examples. And very soon, if you win those club races and you're really like so extra special, you will get picked up even by go-kart teams who will let you race for free, because they sell chassis. That's their business. So they need the best drivers to race their chassis. Yeah. So even at the age of 10, you can get free drives if you're the very best. So it is very difficult to access, but for the very best, it kind of is possible. Like in terms of budget, it costs £250,000 per year, even for a 12-year-old kid to race in go-karts. Like, it's insane.
Sorry, can you just break that down for me? How is it 250,000?
Because you need to test all the time. So you need tires, engines, several chassis, a mechanic, the truck probably, whatever. And so it just ends up in a huge cost. And it's a big travel expense also, because you race at least across Europe. So it's a lot that goes into it.
None of our kids are racing.
Well, no, not
none of them. That's outrageous.
We had the go-kart track though. I mean,
even my daughters, huh? It's like, no. And especially my oldest is not interested. My youngest is a nutcase. So she's definitely, I go skiing with her, I'm like cringing all day long. She does not care, like no fear. She was airborne on just yesterday. 2 days ago we were skiing. She was flying, like she didn't care. She just went for it. And I thought this is going to be the biggest shunt ever, and she actually landed.
No, like, get in a car.
She landed it. So no racing. I would be terrified. It's dangerous. It really is dangerous.
What age then would you say the kind of Formula One bosses, or you know those running actually the teams, start looking at the circuit? Oh,
the kids get picked up now at the age of 10.
And what was your experience of that?
So I got picked up by the go-karting team at the age of 12. So I raced for free as a result, because they realized that I could be one of those winning the races for them. And then at the age of 14, the McLaren Mercedes Formula One team picked me up and Lewis Hamilton. So then they put myself and Lewis Hamilton together in the McLaren Mercedes go-karting team. It was just the two of us. And we finished first and second in most big events. Unfortunately, he finished first most of the time. I finished second. That was now I understand why it was so tough to win races. I mean, he ended up becoming the greatest of all time. So it felt pretty tough to win races at the time. Yeah, so that's how it started. And we became best friends also at the age of 13, 14. You know, we're sharing hotel room all year long, traveling the world, holidays together.
Are you going to school at this point? I mean, 13, 14.
Yeah, going to school, missing every other week, Wednesday to Friday. Yeah. And no extra treatment, a special treatment. I had to catch up on homework and everything, but I was a little bit in the nerdy direction, so I got the job done.
So it's quite an adult life to live as a young man.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
How did you...
But sport is a great way, I think, for kids to grow up with something that they're focused with. I think it really is something that can give you so much as a child growing up, you know? I think it's very valuable.
At what age did you make your first money?
I was probably 19, yeah.
Can you remember what the paycheck was?
Yeah, it was 80,000. And that was being a test driver for a Formula One team. But the 80,000, as soon as it hit my account, it went straight back out, because my dad had taken out a loan to pay for my accident damage in Formula 2 at the time. I crashed the car, and my front wing and front end, whatever, was destroyed, and it cost 80,000.
So sorry, but you had to pick up the cost.
Yeah, because he didn't want to well, the goal wasn't for him not to fund any of my racing, so we really tried to fund it all with sponsors, but it didn't include the big crash. So I had to take out a bank loan for the big crash, and so the first salary went straight to cover that.
And when you're racing in Formula 2 or the tiers below Formula 1, there's no salary attached to that?
No. You're lucky if with sponsors you can cover the costs, which even that usually is not possible, because Formula 2 now is like 2 million a year for a young guy to drive one season in the best team. It's insane. So there, sure, there you have to have the support, and you'll only get it if you're really extra special.
And you get your first drive. At what age was that then? Where
So
you
that's
won
in Formula One?
In Formula
so
1,
that's Williams again. So my dad was a world champion with Williams, and here I am winning the Formula 2 championship and standing in the garage with Frank Williams, the legend, and him giving me a nudge and saying very casually, Nico, we want you in our car next year. This was Monza GP, and Williams at the time was like the greatest team. So that was one of those insane moments. The legend telling me, we want you in the car next year.
Take us to like your first Formula One. I'm always intrigued with like, what does one do the night before? What do you do on the morning?
So stressful. It's really, because Formula One is like, it's untouchable. It seems like you wouldn't be able to do that. Like, it's so insane. And to then be on the grid next to Michael Schumacher, the greatest of all time in the red Ferrari.
And you're how old?
20. And I'm on the grid next to Michael Schumacher, like literally side by side. The greatest of all time that I'm watching since I'm a kid.
So are you?
Oh, seriously? Yeah. Scared. Like seriously scared.
Do you eat anything that day?
Well, I was someone who I really tried to do human performance at the very best, which meant whole nutrition plan, sleep plan, meditation, everything. We can cover that a little bit later. So it was very much regimented,
Can you tell us a little bit about the teams? Because I find them fascinating in how they actually operate and how they're structured. And you have your two drivers, your engineers, the team principals, the branding and marketing. How does it all fit together and actually operate as one unit?
Yeah, so it really, for me, a Formula One team is comparable to the greatest startup of our time or the greatest tech business of our time. The level of leadership, of camaraderie, of structure within, and the communicational structure and everything, I think is so phenomenal. Because let's remember, Mercedes Formula One team, I'm not sure what the number is now, but there's more than 1,500 employees just for 2 racing cars. Like 1,500, that's massive. And it's at the highest level of performance. Every detail matters, every screw, every gram, it's so close. Because pole position very often is 200ths of a second on a 1 minute 30 lap against Ferrari. So your car against a Ferrari, and it's 200ths, which is like that at the end of a 1 minute 30 lap, and that can be a couple of grams here, there. It's mad.
I've seen somewhere that you said you changed the paint on your helmet.
Yeah, because again, I really was pushing the boundaries as much as I could on human performance, on getting the maximum out of what I could bring to the table. And in those years when I was active towards the end of my career, it was 1 kilo of body weight, because the car and driver was overweight, over the minimum weight. So 1 kilo extra of my body weight was 300ths of a second slower per lap. You know it from the cyclists, they have to be super skinny. You know it from the ski jumpers. Maybe the British don't know that too well, but ski jumpers also have to be super skinny.
I'd pay so much money to ski jump.
so also in F1
I'm not ski jumping.
In F1 at the time, you had to be so on diet and skinny, because 1 kilogram, 300ths of a second per lap was huge. So imagine over a race distance, it's like 2 seconds of race time. 1 kilogram, my body, 2 seconds, which is very easily the difference between first and second place. It's always very close. And so I paid a lot of attention to that. I brought my own body mass index down to the very minimum, but I had to stay strong at the same time.
It's hard.
It's a balance to find. Stopped cycling, which was my favorite sport to train, because it lost my leg muscles. That was 500 grams gone.
Really?
And so I was just walking on the treadmill instead then, to try and minimize any leg muscle. Removed the paint from my helmet, so black helmet. That was 80 grams. I measured it, I remember, it's 80 grams. So that's why I was pure carbon on the helmet. And it really added up. And then there's a wonderful example, because I saved up to 1 kilo by doing all these measures that I was working on. And then qualifying in my championship year in Suzuka, Lewis was on pole position, and I come around to finish my lap, and I snatch it away from him with 200ths of a second. So 200ths of a second, I'm on pole. I get it from him, and that's the 1 kilo that I had been working on. I won the race, he messed up his start, and a couple of races later I was world champion. So it's really, in F1 also, it's just the details make such a monumental difference, as also in a high performance space like you guys are now active in the venture world. Similar.
It's marginal gains.
Of course.
Dave,
It's the art of marginal gains. very often neglected. And if you put 5 together, it's a massive game.
You mentioned there kind of the amount of people behind the scenes and then obviously you out front.
Yeah.
Do you feel the weight of expectation and pressure, knowing that there are so many people working night and day and a bad sleep the night before?
No, sure, of course. I mean, the Christmas bonuses for everybody depend on what you're doing on the racetrack. And there's a lot of course, there's a lot of expectation on the shoulders of
Do you silence that out? Like, how do you quieten the mind?
Oh, that's difficult, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, so after the first year of my career, which I found mentally quite challenging to go into F1, and I sought for a way, I've been training my body flat out, but I realized I'm not doing anything for my brain.
Why did you find the first year challenging?
Just because everything is new, and you don't have experience what the others do. Every track you arrive at is new. It's all new, so you're really on the back foot going into it, and you only have one chance as a young driver. If you mess up your first year and you're not good enough, you're out forever. Yeah, so the dream of Formula One is gone. So you only really have one single chance, and it's to make a mark in that first year. So the pressure is really on, and so I found that mentally quite challenging. So at the end of the first year, then I went out and I started to look what would be the best way to also train my mind, because I'm spending 4 or 5 hours a day with my body, but my mind, I can see there's more potential there with the fear I'm carrying with me. So let's work on that as well. And that was the beginning of me working together with a psychologist and philosopher, actually. And I spent so many hours on that, 2 hours every 2 days throughout the whole winter. And it was for me like...
What did that entail?
So first of all, it's all the measures of training, like meditation, visualization, presence. It's all these methods, which you learn to master. Essentially, it's just with practice. And then it's also about learning. Philosophy is really learning about life, understanding us humans. Why am I jealous? When my wife looks at another guy, and you don't understand that if somebody doesn't teach that to you. And now I was able to understand what is the reason. And then you can't switch off emotions very easily. Usually you can't. But what you can really control is how you react to things like that. And that has a huge snowball effect. So if you better understand, you're able to react to things much more appropriately. And that will have a massive snowball on your whole life. Does your girlfriend ever look at other guys?
Mine?
My wife?
No.
Yeah.
Your wife?
Yeah.
She does?
Yeah, all the time.
How does that feel?
Yeah, really great.
I want to ask something, but I don't know if I can. What are you more jealous of? Wife looking at another man or Lewis Hamilton when he won in your race?
Probably Lewis Hamilton.
Fair enough.
Our wives they're gonna love us.
It's the only thing that really now I have like a feeling of like, how do you say, regret or jealousy or whatever. It's to see someone winning the race, because that is just, it's so amazing to win in sports. It's just amazing. And I have the parallel, like last night, we can touch on it later, I had a cool milestone with my venture project, which is very current at the moment. And it's just, there's never really a finish line. It's annoying. Like in sports, you see it and you know when you cross that line, it's done. And so you can have that explosion of emotion. But in business, there's never the real finish line. There's always a kind of yes, but no, not really. And we need to wait. And that was it's a bit,
It's a change in mentality.
Yeah, but it's not as nice.
You have to be patient. But my question to you is, when you make a bad investment, it can negatively impact one's mindset. And when you make a good investment, it can very positively, both in a dangerous way where it either makes you overconfident or overly negative. Yeah. When you have a bad race or an insanely good race, how do you stay even and not go either way too long?
It's hard because sports mentality, as in business and venture, certainly, as you were saying, but I probably sports mentality is even more powerful in your actual performance, because everything is measured in tenths of seconds. So it probably has even more of an effect. And so it's so important to find ways of putting behind you failures and things, and I spend a lot of time practicing that also, or learning about that again with this coach. And where I got to was that it's really in the understanding that failures are most of the time some of the greatest opportunities for you, to learn and to progress and grow as a human being. And if you start to really integrate that understanding, it will still remain horrible to fail, But if you start to see that actually, hey, this is an opportunity for me, and you switch that mindset, which is essentially comes from practice as well, that was very helpful.
But I'm just interested on that, the success and failure and how you defined it. Because when you're in that car next to Lewis at Mercedes with the best car, I'd imagine a failure was not winning the race.
Failure was coming second, one second away. It was a huge failure.
But previous to that, it probably was, if you were driving at Williams, success looked very different. It wasn't winning a race. It was it's a different way. So how, when you then move the teams and you get in that car, did you adjust that kind of mentality to understand a different level of success?
Well, you always, when you're in a certain position, you always know what success failure is within the team. The difference is that you have the 100 million general public who start to join you in the judgment. Because when you're at Williams and you're 8th, just no one pays attention. They don't even know. And they don't know whether that's been a successful or not successful day. You just know internally, especially if you're ahead of your teammate. But once you then get to the front, and you're winning races and fighting for races and championships, that's when the whole general public starts to judge every meter that you're doing. And that just adds that incredible, huge extra intensity. And that's why it's much easier for teammates to be friends as long as you're not fighting for race wins. Yeah, so you'll see sometimes teammates can be friends when they're like 8th, 10th on the grid, much easier because there's not much at stake. But once you start fighting for wins and it's just you against that teammate, that's like a whole different story.
Would you accept the terminology 1 and 2 driver when you're in a team with Lewis? You said no, I'm going for this exactly the same as you do.
Well, I obviously did, yeah.
I
saw myself as the number 1 and he was the number 2.
So when stuff comes up,
no, but equal opportunity, of course. But that's how the team framed it also, and it was true. I mean, it's factually that the team really tried to give us equal opportunity. The problem is that it's so hard because it's never equal. Yeah. How often is it that the factory only manages to make one of the new front wings, which is 0.2 a lap faster, but there's only one. So who gets it? How often is it that strategy within a race, at some point you have to give a preference to one or the other, and it's so dynamic. So it's impossible to keep it equal all the time. So, and that's where the pain comes from.
Do you voice that discontent? Do you go?
Of course, it's always, every weekend it's a topic. Because you have to, because if you don't voice it, it makes it too easy for the team also to walk over you and to always nudge a little bit of the preferential treatment the other way. So unfortunately, in the nature of us humans, you have to keep banging on it all the time and keep pushing to make sure that because humans will tend to go for the easy way if you offer it to them.
Did you have certain situations over radio where you were asked to concede position?
Yeah, of course. Even Monaco, I'm fighting for the world championship. I think I'm leading the world championship. I'm leading the world championship. And I'm second place, and Daniel Ricciardo is running around, disappearing in the distance. I'm struggling. It's wet, but no one can overtake me because you just can't. And the team comes on the radio, let Lewis past. Because we had an internal rule that if we're being under threat of losing the weekend to another team, then we need to work together and allow the faster driver of us to have a chance to go for that win. That was a team internal rule. So I had to move out to the side, although I'm fighting for the championship with him, and let him and wave him past. And that's horrible. That's really, really tough.
And because it was preconceived, I guess that's a situation where you're not going to fight against it.
You need to play the long game, and you'll just lose out because then the team really goes against you. If you misrespect the instructions, which are very clearly laid out, it's tough. Then you fast forward to the last race of the year. Lewis was putting our team result in jeopardy at the last race because he was backing everybody up, including myself, to give him a chance for the championship. But it went against that exact rule that we had. And that's why, as he was going slower and slower to try and back me up into the opposition, which would have then handed him the world championship, the team was using this rule and saying, Lewis, you have to go faster now, or let Nico pass or whatever. And he did not respect that then. Which is, of course, in a way understandable because it's coming down to the line, the world championship is at stake. But considering that I moved out the way in Monaco...
What happens if you don't respect it?
What happens? You don't get a fine or anything, but the team is very, very disappointed with you. You depend on the rest of your team to do a good job. Alone, you're not going to be able to achieve much. And so here it is too. If I make an enemy out of my own team alone, I'm not going to get far, also because they will then benefit. They will give preferential treatment more and more to the teammates. But it's a fine line, because you do need to push to the gray area also there.
What makes the best teams?
Is leadership. And then the leadership talent just below that, and the way they're organized. Longevity also. Like Mercedes' great strength was that no key team member left for more than 10, almost 15 years now. And that's such a, if you look at Ferrari, you have churn of team members. I mean, huge at Ferrari, and that's why
it's the number one reason why Amazon's actually been so successful, because they have the longest retention on their core exec team.
So
average retention for an Amazon exec is 17 years. So you think knowledge compounds with time, like it does in teams. You know each other, you trust each other.
Exactly.
Same.
So this is Mercedes, and this is one of the key ingredients for their success, and Red Bull actually as well.
Can we just unpack that though? When you think about the leadership that you've experienced within these teams, what made the great leaders great?
So I've seen different kind of leadership. I saw the old school leadership at Williams, which was a military approach, like zero empathy, like empathy out the door. Human feelings, non-existent. The humans do not feel, okay? It's military. And I think back in the day, probably that worked quite well, but it's not, I think, not anymore the leadership that works best in our time now. And I have examples then. I mean, first of all, I crashed in one race, and then the team leader calls me Monday morning, 9 o'clock, phone rings. Nico, you were absolutely useless to us this weekend. I'm 20 years old, Jeez, you were absolutely useless to us this weekend. And that was more or less the gist of the conversation. Then there was not much else. Next one is a couple of races later. I'm like, I don't know, beginning of qualifying, somewhere like 15th, really struggling. And we should have been more further forward. So another team boss, again Williams, but another person from the leadership, big boss actually, comes to the car in the middle of qualifying. I'm fully focused looking at the data analysis, which actually was one of my strengths, leveraging that. And he comes, he opens my visor, and he shouts, because the engine is on, he shouts in with his military voice, Nico, if you continue driving like that, you're going to put us out of business. This is the quote, yeah, like literally those words. If you continue driving like that, you're going to put us out of business. This is the middle of qualifying. I did put it in P6 right after, which was like a huge success. So I did an awesome job. So maybe it worked. But no. I mean, that's not the best. In fact, one of them recently wrote me and said, we're really sorry. We know now in hindsight we were too hard on you. So that was not great. And then fast forward, Mercedes, you have like a very modern style leadership, which is led by Toto Wolff, who for me is the best leader in F1. And it's very firm and very, very strong, but with a lot of empathy. Always trying to understand the needs of each individual, and a lot of mediating. So that Niki Lauda was part of the mediating as well. The Formula One legend, who was kind of a boss at Mercedes in my time as well.
That team was so dominant that you were in, and you were winning back-to-back titles, Constructors' Championships.
Yeah. It's often it's more than that. It's one of the greatest sporting success stories of all time in any sport, because it's 8 world championships on the trot, which you will find there's maybe another example in basketball, I believe, I'm not sure, but it's one of the top 3 of all time.
You're in that environment, and at the same time, you want to keep improving and innovating and developing. Yeah. How did they look to do that, to ensure that each year you were better than you were previously?
It was just a general push in all directions. I wouldn't be able to say something specific now.
And the motivation stayed the same from everyone? There was
the motivation, the hardest thing is when you are so dominant, you start to get complacent.
Yeah.
Because you don't have that target that you're just too used to winning. We know that. So Toto liked to use targets. So he would really like frame the Red Bull car because we did kind of hate Red Bull, or even Ferrari, but I think more Red Bull, which still lasts till today.
Yeah.
And they would really use that as a target. In psychology, you tend to say that that's not the best way to go, but it did work because it does keep you just with that chip, because you just hate to lose so badly. And F1, there's so much more, because it's the human performance element, it's the marginal gains, it's leveraging data. The car has infinite amount of data, which you can leverage as a driver.
Did you really see that explode when you were driving, the movement from less technology-centric to more? Yeah.
Although they do limit because of cost a lot. It could be crazy, but they put a lot of limitations in for cost. So it stays within reason, but also there, look, I would love to actually hold up a Formula One steering wheel now, but I don't have one. Maybe you can blend one in. There's so many. What's that?
It was me holding one.
And you blend it in.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So here we go. Wait. Oversteer. Okay.
I can't drive.
No way. No. Okay. Next activity we do is we go on a go-karting track. No, seriously. Me in reverse against you forwards. This is like game on, right? We're game on here.
10?
We're game on.
Done.
Do I get to drive straight?
And you get to drive straight as well. Yeah. That's too easy then, because I think you're a good driver.
I can drive.
Yeah. Anyway.
Can you show me which one's forward and back?
Yeah.
No. Back to the point. So steering wheel. If you see the buttons, it is so powerful what you can do from those buttons to change the whole way the car is handling. I mean, it's like you have the whole braking, where you can change at any point in time how much of the braking is done on the front, how much on the back. The state of the car is changing all the time, So the optimum is really quite complex. Like you start braking, the car dives on the nose, full aerodynamic load, you're putting so much load on the front, you almost need like infinite front braking. But then when you start steering, the car, which is close to the corner, the car rolls over, and the first thing the car will lift up is the inside front tire. Yeah. And so that will lock up. So in that area, then you actually want much more rear braking. And then every corner is different. So just on that space where you can do almost anything in terms of braking profile. You're not allowed to preset things. So you can only manually change things from in the car. You can't preset, and for that corner I'd want -2, +4, whatever. You can only do it manually. So if you look, like, one of my strengths eventually was to master, which I learned from Michael Schumacher, he was a pioneer in that, to do corner by corner settings. So you're at like maximum speed, 100% qualifying lap, and still have the capacity to do corner by corner settings that are adapted to the physics of these specific corners. And there's braking, engine, how much engine braking. Then there's a whole differential as well at different speeds. And differential is how connected the rear tire speeds are. They're fully locked, so they always go the same, which will just make you go straight on all the time, but give you a lot of rear grip. Or fully open, they can rotate freely, which like gives you like super steering, but the rear is like all over the place. And every situation, again, will require a different for optimum. And you can just, like, if you would look at a lap of mine, it's just after every corner, it's flicking at least 2 switches to adapt to the next needs. And that's tenths of a second per lap. It's huge lap time. And again, a huge difference between the most experienced driver and a rookie coming in.
If you have to think about that, are you already too slow? Is it instinct?
You have more and more free capacity. With experience, to drive perfect at 100%, you use only 70% of your brain capacity, and you have 30 left to think about all these things. Tire management through the lap and all the settings from corner to corner. But even today, you'll see very few drivers nailing this corner to corner, even the most experienced. Some are just lazy or don't know the opportunity that there lies in that, or whatever. You'll see that still many don't even do it. And it's tenths of a second per lap.
Can I ask you mentioned there that cost actually can be one of the reasons why it's not more invested in terms of the technology.
Yeah.
Respectfully, really? Like, these are huge companies in themselves.
Yeah.
Putting another 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million in, if it makes a difference.
Yeah, no, sure. The problem is that for the sport to be healthy, you need the teams that have lesser budgets and are more financially constrained to still have an opportunity to do good results. And if it only becomes a who has the most money game, which it used to be, it's very unhealthy for the sport. And it will break the sport, because eventually there will be too few teams that are able to survive financially. Because if you have no chance to have success, you won't get sponsors.
So forgive me then, you have caps on spending on technology, and
so now there's a cap on total spend. It's 130 million.
Across the season.
Yeah, the teams are not allowed to spend $1 or more. And there's huge auditing groups going in and checking their financials, and this is I think it's been amazing for the sport, because first of all, it's brought the playing field together. So you see like teams that have lesser budgets being able to still come towards the front at times. So that's been great. So it's compacted everything, made things a bit less predictable. Although actually, when you look at last year's Red Bull winning everything, but in general, and it's also created profitable business models out of the racing teams themselves, which changes the complete dynamic because suddenly, if teams are profitable, it makes the whole dynamic of the sport different.
Can you give us an insight into the team cost then?
So team cost is 130 million on the chassis. Then you have probably around 200 million on the driver salaries, so 100 per year. Just kidding. So we had lunch before and I had them over with that right. What, you made so much money? But a top driver will earn 40 million pound plus. Yeah. And there also is very, very power law skewed. There's only very few drivers that will earn that amount, perhaps only 2 or 3. And then actually going down to the 20th driver, he will earn less than 1 million, which of course is still a lot. But compared to the top drivers, it's a smaller amount, of course.
So is the cap only applied to the chassis?
So cap is chassis, driver salary is out of it for now, which has been a dynamic in driver salaries pushing them up tendency. Then there's paying for engine, which is always mostly a separate entity. You have to pay rent to get the engines. Even Mercedes team pays rent to get the engines, even though it's Mercedes building the engines, but it's a separate firm, I believe. Then you have, what else? I mean, salaries of the top 3 staff.
And teams are turning a profit.
And teams are now turning a profit, especially the top teams, turning a huge profit. I have heard some of them turning a profit of around 100 million a year. So it's become incredibly profitable businesses. And even the teams that are a bit further back have the opportunity now to be break even at least, if not be profitable. And that's why the team valuations, I mean, you have heard rumors, right, about a consortium buying into Alpine. Maybe you can share what did the rumors say? How much was the valuation there?
Yeah, 200 million investment.
And when I was driving, the racing teams were 100 million and loss making. And now it's suddenly...
You should have invested.
Billion. Yeah, but it was unpredictable. Even the team owners were against this cost cap because it felt like they were the advantage of the big budget was taking away from them.
Yeah.
Until they noticed that, hey, this is actually going to be super profitable and actually make sense.
Top F1 team, what does that generate in year, revenue-wise?
More than 400 million pounds. They are top 10 in terms of sports team globally, in terms of revenue. The area where someone like a NFL team in the US still has an advantage is in stadium revenue. Yeah. Because an F1 team doesn't have a stadium. And that will add another 15 to 20% on total revenues. So that's how they get from 400 to 500. And that's why a Formula 1 team is not yet at number 1.
If drivers, the top ones are 40 million a year, what are the other payments? Is it like, in football you have appearance fees, you have
goal bonus, that's in F1 is different. Because it's very different because the F1 teams have so many sponsors, much more than a football team, visible in a way. So they tend to not allow drivers to have their own sponsors because the driver will have a 5 million sponsor, which could be a bank, and that will cannibalize the opportunity for the team to have a bank as a title sponsor, which will pay 50 million. And so most of the time they'll not allow you, or very constrained, allow the drivers to have personal sponsors.
So your image
if you're the best in the world, like Lewis Hamilton, he'll be able to carve out those rights, yeah, because you can decide.
And then you'll agree non-competitive ones.
Whatever.
What was your biggest sponsor?
So I was quite limited on that. I had a jewelry company at the time that was a sponsor of mine, yeah, but beyond that, not much.
And was that because the image rights were locked in the teams?
Yeah. So jewelry was the only thing that was also not conflicting because they wouldn't have another jewelry. So that worked.
Do you get more if you win a race? Is there?
Oh yeah, so there's usually race bonuses.
Okay. How much is a race bonus?
It can go up. It would be up to 1 million probably for the top
for a win.
Yeah. So someone like Verstappen would probably be at least on 1 million. On 1 million, I guess. Wow. The teams also try and cap that because otherwise you can have these moonshot years where Verstappen wins 20 races. You'd hope that it's a little bit capped. That would have been expensive because his base salary obviously is insane already. Although, I mean, he would deserve it. I mean, he's done such an incredible job.
So, I mean, touching on it then in development of Formula One as media product, post Liberty Media acquisition of Bernie and what it's done for the industry and the drivers there and the profile that it built, because you stopped just before this move forward. But I feel from an independent side, getting an insight into these drivers has been incredible, because previously your interaction and engagement was with a helmet and it wasn't with the face. What do you think about how they've actually managed to execute that and why they've been successful?
So when I was still racing, it was like people were worried. The sport is dying out. The next generation won't even want a driver's license. The coolest thing back in the day was cars. Now nobody cares about cars anymore. They just want to get from A to B in a shared vehicle. That was the kind of consensus. So there was a really big worry that the sport was going to nosedive, and it was starting to lose traction. And then came, there's just two things. It's social media, where Bernie Ecclestone always said that social media takes eyeballs away from TV, and TV is where he makes money. So let's keep social media down, which is the short game, but not the long game, because actually social media has increased eyeballs now. So that's one. They've really opened up social media. You see Formula One also, the YouTube channel growing massively. Views are really strong, even comparing to other sports platforms now. It's like a top 5. And also the drivers, and you have a cool new generation that is very social media savvy. Someone like Lando Norris, or all these guys, really very cool to follow. So social media was opened, more rights also. Like when I was at the track, I wasn't even allowed to make a video and post on my social media. Really? The rights were with the TV. Because the TV would get angry, because suddenly you're giving the drivers rights which we've paid for. It was really, really restricted. And all that has been completely opened up. So social media, big change. And I think the biggest one is Netflix. And Netflix, I'm convinced that it's not something you can plan. And I don't think they did plan. I think they got very lucky. Our sport got lucky, because they did a good job with it. And they managed to find characters that just were so open. It was like a reality TV show. Yeah. And it's getting the humans behind the helmets or behind the team bosses or whatever.
That's a good name for a show, The Humans Behind the Helmets.
My podcast should be called that, but anyways, that's not.
That's cannibalizing.
That's on pause. Too much effort. And look at tennis. Yeah, they tried to do it as well. Yeah. And it didn't work on Netflix. Yeah.
Why do you think it didn't work?
It's boring. The characters didn't open up. It's not a reality TV show. It's staged.
But that was personalities, right? As well, because they didn't.
F1, I think they just got really lucky. There's these personalities just are great to watch. You have even the personalities from teams that are further down the grid. You have the Gunther Steiner, who's become a legend in his own right, just from Netflix, and it's just great to watch.
But there's also so much in that sport which isn't known about, and I think that was what did it so well as well. The involvement of everyone behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's in my venture projects now. Also, this Netflix is helping me so much compared with like 5 years ago, because now in the US and in Europe, of course, this F1 is just so big. Everybody is a Formula One fan, so that's really helping me a lot in my projects as well. So thank you, Netflix.
Some have said it's a distraction. Would you have enjoyed it as a driver?
I would have hated it, because I was so maxed out on my performance that I really did not want any extra distraction. And filming for Netflix is such a distraction, because of course the microphone is always in your head, even in the real moment. You're speaking to your engineer confidentially. Netflix microphone here. I would have hated it, really. But at the same time, I would have really wanted to do it because of the reach and power it generates. I would have wanted to do it. And that's why most drivers and team principals are on it. But it would have been very demanding and not good for winning races.
Do you care how other people think about you?
Yeah, so I think I'm a little bit more than average on that. I've always been less self-confident, and always a little bit more than average, like needing that recognition from people around. It has pros and contras. On the one side, it's a sensitivity which will keep yourself questioning yourself, and as a result of questioning yourself, you'll be making perhaps more progress compared to someone who's very, very self-confident and always thinks, it's the other guy's fault, it's not my fault. Whereas me, more often, I would always think it's my fault. So that keeps you questioning. But it's quite unsettling at times, because when the recognition leaves you, and which in the sport happens so quickly, it's up and down all the time, it can be quite unsettling. So there's pros and cons.
Can I ask you a question? How important do you think it was? I hope it's okay for me to bring this up, but I
don't like that topic.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
It's 1-1 now. He's got us both. He's got us both. I fell for it.
I was super sensitive.
I'm so happy you got it in now.
We'll come to the Ventures side soon.
That face has to be the meme of the show. Huh? No, that's fine.
I was going to ask, how important do you think it is having your wife throughout, who's been this enduring source of support for 20 years, in actually having that stability?
Yeah, so I believe that you really have an opportunity with your private life to enhance your performance in your work or in your sport. I believe it's an integral part. And that, I must say, I'm very fortunate that I found my wife so long. So we've been together 21 years now, coming up soon, and married more than 10 years also. My private life has always been so stable, so energy. How do you say? Recharging. Yeah, I was always able to recharge in my private life, because sports, it's like 200% intensity for a longer weekend, but then you do go back to much lower. In the job, it's probably more straight line, but sports is like huge peaks. You come home, you're away, and you can really calm down again. And it's so key to really recharging.
And throughout the season, what's your opportunity to actually indulge in that private life?
Well, that's the big difference to someone who's like a tennis player. A tennis player, private life, disaster. They're on the road all year long. They're training 6 hours a day. Wow, that's. I mean, in our case, perhaps it's even lucky that you're not allowed to test the racing car. You're only allowed to test 3 days a year, and that's before the season. That's it. They get 3 days in the car. That's it. Then it's just racing again to save costs, and so that I think is a kind of even a blessing, because it really allows you to have this downtime in between from all the crazy intensity. So
I'm intrigued when you say that 3 days, and that's all because of cost. Okay. Yeah. Well, then if we cut margin elsewhere, we could test more. If we tested more.
No, because it's just regulated.
If you had 6, would you be more successful?
6, probably. Yeah, you could do a couple more A/B testings to better understand the car. You as a driver will make progress with every day of testing. Because imagine Roger Federer stopping to play tennis. He doesn't train anymore. He just goes to the Grand Slams. He'll have no chance. So certainly the level of driving will not be as high in F1 as if they would be testing all the time.
I'm so sorry to ask that. So if you're only allowed to test 3 days...
Apology accepted.
3 days a year, what are you doing for the rest of the time?
So that is a challenge. So again, there you need to be innovative. So I had created this fast reaction with all senses program, which I actually use for car crashes in hospitals to check the cognitive abilities. So I was working a lot on that, and it activated all senses. It was pinching and seeing and everything. So I was like flat out on that all the time. I had a go-kart up in the mountains here. I would go go-karting as much as possible, just to keep those skills honed, to really try and maximize the training of the brain as much as possible. Yeah.
I meant to ask this earlier because you were talking about your fitness and what you had to give it. I don't think people quite realize how fit you need to be to.
Yeah, that's a pity, because we have the helmet, you can't see.
Yeah.
That's a real pity in our sport.
But the exertion of force on your body, the ability to actually drive one of those cars is not just as simple as.
No, this is insane. I mean, look at, there was Qatar last year. They were puking in their helmets. A driver had to abandon the race with 20 laps to go. He was done, like physically, and everybody is on the edge. And that's a pity that you don't really see that from the outside. It is so hard. Not always, it depends on the track, the conditions, but especially a hot race like this Qatar example or Singapore, you have a 2-hour race. You can only relax in the corners. In the straights. In the corners, you're actually holding your breath because you have such G-forces, and you need to hold your position to be able to control the car and feel the car. So you're not really breathing, you're just breathing on the straight. Even on the straight though, you have the seatbelt so tight for safety, and the seat is molded to your body. So it's the perfect fit, compressed against your body. So your ribs cannot, your ribs are used to hold you in position, so they can't expand. So you can hardly breathe because seatbelts, everything. And then you have your skiing outfit almost on, with layers and layers of fireproof outfit, and no fresh air because the visor is closed. It's 50 degrees in the car. You're sitting on 55-degree asphalt. You're sweating. I lost 4 kilos, so 8 pounds of weight in a 2-hour race. That's more than 5% of my body weight. So you can just go in a sauna, put yourself on a spinning bike for 2 hours wearing a skiing suit. And that will give you a similar
Do you have to hydrate sufficiently beforehand then?
Sure. So there's a whole hydration plan as well.
What is that?
Which I also kind of studied, because there's like the intracellular hydration, which is the key, rather than the extracellular. And there you can learn from bodybuilders, because they're very good at getting their weight down for weigh in and then building their weight up again. They're really hydration experts, or even like triathletes. So we really studied that a lot to optimize that as well. Yeah.
But also to retain the cognitive function and ability that you do when you're 55-degree bodysuit.
It's hard. And that's why you need to be so fit to deal with those circumstances.
Was the meditation crucial to the focus? Also just the intense focus for 2 hours?
Sure, yeah. So meditation, I did like 45 minutes in the morning, 45 in the evening, every day.
Really?
And
you weren't doing much else when you were only testing for 3 days a year.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. An hour and a half of meditation.
Cheers, my time. No, still 4 hours of physical training, 2 hours of mental training, plus the meditation. So it did add up to quite a lot.
4 hours of physical training?
Yeah, sure. Of course, I mean, 2 hours of that is like 2.5 is a bicycle trip until the last season where I dropped that. But it would be 2 hours on the treadmill. Then the specific muscles. So you have the neck, the arms specific muscle training, which you have to do. And then there would be the cognitive training, reaction. So it added up.
What did you do to train your neck?
So the neck was the torture machine, was what it was called, which I custom built one for myself. So seat, and you had one big stack of weights here, 37.5 kilos, like in the gym, which you could change the weighting. And then you have the helmet with hooks, left, right, front, rear. And so you're just rotating. You put the hook here, 37 kilos, and all the different hold, and then that's it, with the steering wheel at the same time. And the steering wheel had weight as well. And it's horrible. You're sitting in there an hour doing these, it's horrible.
If we were looking at that with 3 days of practice, your only experience of understanding those forces then as a driver when you're first getting into the sport is through training programs like that, which give you that kind of intensity. Yeah. So when you first actually go and experience that, is it actually like what you're training with, or is it a complete...
So I did train for my first test in a Formula 1 car, and I did 27 laps. And on lap 28, I hit the brakes at the end of the straight, and my head fell into my knees. I was going 300 kilometers an hour. I hit the brake, and my head just flopped forward. I couldn't. There's no way to hold it up. So that's how it's just driving the car essentially. Also that you build the necessary muscle. It's 5.5 G when you hit those brakes, which is extreme, and it hits the back of your head because the head is not held by anything, and your head weighs 7 kilos. So you're hit by 7 times 5, 35 kilos on the back of your head. Bam.
Did you ever feel fear in that car with the speed?
Yeah, because look, Azerbaijan example, you're doing 350 kilometers an hour, so that would be 220, 230 mile an hour, 230 mile an hour in the city, and on the left is the pit entrance. So there's a pointed wall facing you, just next to you, and you know that if now the tire fails, and we've seen examples of tires failing on the long straight, you just know that if the tire fails now and a bit of bad luck and you're in there, you're not here anymore. So there's certain moments like that where the other drivers I think are all nutcases, so they wouldn't think much about it, but I was, as I said, a little bit more sensitive. So I would think about that sometimes, but it didn't, not to the extent that it slows you down, because obviously you do feel somewhat safe in the car and you are committed, but those thoughts did come sometimes.
Did you enjoy racing here?
Yes, because of the challenge, but at the same time, it's not that dangerous because the speeds are much lower.
What's the difference between?
You don't really risk your life too much in going around Monaco. Although in a race with rain where you don't see, then yes, absolutely.
Top speed you'd hit here?
Well, you do 300 out of the tunnel, yeah.
And the quickest races you do?
You don't really risk. You're not. It's not. A race is dangerous. It depends. I know there's other tracks where fear would play a bigger role. Yeah.
Did you ever feel like, oh fuck, don't want to drive around in circles again? Or like
sometimes.
So you weren't like pumped every time?
No, you don't.
And then how did you motivate yourself then when bluntly you didn't feel the?
I had a championship at stake, I think, and I had the other guy who was trying to take it from me again. I think that was a pretty easy motivation.
It is a nice segue in. I really want to talk about it though. That 2016 success.
Yeah.
how it came about for you, what you actually did that year, and then what it actually meant for you moving forward post.
Yeah.
Can you just take us inside that year, that 2016 championship win?
Yeah, I just did another step of putting everything I had and throwing everything into it. Just dedicating every single moment of my days to being the best I can be, which brought a big intensity to it. But
did you have kids at this point?
Yeah, one daughter.
Did that make obviously it didn't change much?
No,
in terms of sleeping habits.
Yeah, of course that a little bit. Yeah, but my wife was very understanding and very helpful. But it's unavoidable that it does cause a little bit of extra stress at home, as lovely as it is. Yeah. But yeah, so my team would say, because the 2015 year was actually my worst in those years, and they would say, oh, it was because this child was born. That's their view. They would say that. So perhaps, but not directly. Anyway, and then just threw everything at it in 2016 and tried to perfect every marginal gain that was humanly possible.
So did you feel it that year? Did you had a feeling that maybe you could?
No, because I never had that self-confidence. So I never thought that I could actually win. And not even until the last corner of the last race, I still thought something would probably go wrong. Which perhaps is reassuring, because you always hear you need to believe in yourself. Yeah.
Well, you said visualization earlier.
Sure, but you can't switch the damn believe in yourself on. It's hard. Like I tried for 10 years of mental training, believe in yourself. And even in the last day, I still didn't really believe. But the reassuring thing, you can have great success even if you don't believe.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But did you never...
As long as you are so damn committed.
Did you never let yourself get too far ahead then? Is that where you managed to keep it under control? Because as the season was coming to a close, you were in that position.
No, that was mental training advice from the coach. Never, even if, of course, you're focused on the championship, just never say it. Because what you say also has a impact on you. Yeah, if you repeat 10 times that you're the greatest, like Harry here does every morning, you start to believe it, And
you do believe.
But
it.
You start to believe it, or you eventually really believe it. Yeah, and so even like saying it, just don't say it, even if you know it's there. No, I'm taking this race by race. I just want to make sure I do the best possible job. I'm not thinking about championship, and it really worked.
So you win that title. Pinnacle of the sport.
Yeah.
And then you decide to retire.
Yeah.
Why?
It was the perfect exit. My dream was to win the championship once. And it was more than I thought I would be able to do anyways. So I got the championship and
was it everything you expected it to be? I think a lot of people
more. Oh my goodness, that is madness. Oh, the Sunday night party was massive. I was flying. Maybe you can blend in some pictures. I was flying, and that's some of the best.
What did you do?
I was just clubbing, essentially, and all my friends were there, who surprised me. I had invited out everybody. I canceled all invitations prior to the weekend. Even my parents were not allowed to be there. Like it was just, I wanted it business as usual. So everybody was disallowed to come, but they all came anyways in secret. And so then it was just massive. So, and I decided because I felt it was a great opportunity to move on at the highest point.
Was there ever a come down? Often people talk about winning a gold medal and they say amazing, and then when was that?
Big.
And what was
so big to be at the pinnacle of a sport. It's so huge. And after that, it's like everything else forever will be less intense than that.
When was that for you, and how did it happen?
Well, I did 1 month of celebrating. Yeah, traveling here, there, everywhere. Yeah, like a road show. There you're still fully in it. But when you've come home from that road show, it's really over.
Did Toto know? Did you ever?
No.
How did you have that conversation?
No, so we flew back together and we were actually sitting together on the flight, even having dinner in the flight together. But I was scared that I would burst out in tears because I was so tired also by that time. I mean, we didn't sleep anymore. We were just partying all the time, going nuts. So I was really scared that I would burst out in tears if I mentioned this now. And so I decided I'm going to chicken out. And then I just called him right when we left the plane.
Really?
Yeah. So I chickened out on that, which was fine.
And he understood?
Yeah, he kind of got it. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy and unexpected, but he kind of got it. Yeah.
Did you get offered 100 million to keep going?
No, I had an existing contract for 2 further years, and just continuing to race a couple more years was easy going to be 100 million. Yeah, which, but I didn't. I'm so lucky that I made such a lot of money from my sport that money was not a consideration, because I know that what I've earned is anyways so I can fulfill anything, even for my kids and grandkids.
Did you wrap up your identity with Nico, the race driver? And so when you actually then walked out, was it tough for you to find that thing that?
Yeah, so that's always the typical thing, that you become that person, and that becomes your identity. And when you suddenly leave that from one moment to the next, it's difficult also because you need to kind of find a new identity, like what is it? And so you lose that, and that's not easy to come to. It's a big change. Yeah, change is always tough, and it's a big change. And to find a whole new challenge in life and things, yeah, because I am someone, I need challenge, I need competition, like I'm seriously driven, so yeah, it's not so easy to then find the new challenge and understand where's it going to be.
And how did you then go about that process to find that? Did you give yourself some time off to let
one cool thing I did was reach out and connect with as many people that I found inspirational as possible, the biggest kind of names, yeah. And that I did a lot, and that really helped me on this journey.
No better time to do that when you're world champion.
No, exactly. Everybody would take the time.
Yeah. So when we think about that kind of next chapter,
yeah,
what was that discovery phase around? This is what I want to do, and I want to create Rosberg Ventures.
So with Rosberg Ventures now, what we're doing is essentially we're building fund of funds, because the best way to have exposure to the VC asset class is to diversify into the top tier funds of the world. Yeah, that's certainly one of the best ways for estates to allocate to the VC asset class. So that's the challenge that I've taken on, and it's therefore building those allocations essentially, and getting granted those allocations in the best funds out there, the global incumbents, big and small in terms of size. And that's quite an exciting journey now. And importantly is that we're not passive capital. That's very key, because together with our community, we really actively support strategically the underlying startups. And that's the big difference, what we're building and how we then get granted that access, because we're not passive, we're super active, supportive capital.
What does that actually mean?
So for example, in our community, there's a family that has a large cap in consumer goods. Yeah. Now, we will connect and make the connection with the target fund, whereby the consumer goods company will have a look at the underlying companies, startups of the target fund, and we'll say, hey, those 4 are super appropriate because it's a way to recycle plastic, yeah, which is super innovative that this startup is focusing on, super useful. It's a way to sell directly to consumers, D2C, that we want, and they become customers of the startup. Yeah, which is a punctual, super strategic support, which we bring. That's the best example, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that approach why you were able to access the money then that you've been able to do so far? Is it that hands-on approach?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, you need to build your USP essentially. Yeah. What is your positioning? Why are you unique? Why are you different? Of course, leveraging also the whole Formula One and racing platform. There's so many Formula One fans. So that's a key ingredient as well. As we mentioned before, the opportunity that in Europe, a lot of these most influential families have underexposed to venture so far. So there's a really opportunity for us together with them to build that. I discovered mobility, yeah. So because of course mobility, I'm a mobility world champion essentially. So that's my home, and just when I stopped was that immense beginning of this transformation in mobility, electric mobility, the e-scooters, the flying taxis, everything was happening exactly in the moment when I stopped. 2017, everything was kicking off. So it was very coincidence. And that fascinated me because innovation was one of the ingredients for me becoming a world champion. Yeah, that I was innovating every step of the way, the switches, the data, my human performance, everything. And I really loved technology also, the car, understanding the physics of it was really a strength. And so now mobility, suddenly there was this huge opportunity to innovate, and that fascinated me. So that took me into angel investing. I also connect well with the founders because they are like human performance athletes, they're like high performance athletes. It's really similar because it's so intense that you almost, to be a successful founder, you need to have some of those qualities of high performance athletes. Discipline, focus, hustle, all these things are very, very similar traits. So I love connecting with founders, and that's how that journey started. And it was just very exciting.
And were these founders asking you things like that as well about.
So I have a human performance talk right after this with one of the leading startups. Which is one part of what I do to kind of support startups, because they really appreciate the insights. They, especially all the F1 fans then of those startups, which there are more and more, they really appreciate that.
How do you think about investing in fund managers then? If we think about founders being athletes, are the best fund managers athletes too? Yeah.
So you'll see in Silicon Valley now, they have their infrared saunas in the basement, their healthy food, their nutrition plans, their doctors that follow them, their gym sessions, to try and extend their careers also for some of those that are getting a little bit older, because the peak performance, I think, for VC investors is also, is it in end of 20s, early 30s probably.
What's been the hardest thing about the transition?
It's finding a new purpose, because my life was so focused on winning that next race, and that's been, because I had no plan. I had no clue what my life going to be about, no clue. But I'm really enjoying the challenge now in venture, really. That's what I have my biggest focus on by far. And it's super. Last night we were jumping around in the office celebrating. It's cool.
Yeah.
Do you find the transition of mindsets hard between, as you said, finite end goal, short time, for so long venture and unknown?
Yes, but there's a lot of short-term stuff. It's every deal which is short-term, which should come quick, and you need to make quick decisions. There's deadlines all the time, left, right, and center. Opportunities coming and going. So yes, the long-term is there, but there's a lot of short-term stuff as well, which can give you quite a thrill. I love how I really enjoy also how venture is an asset class that is so of interest to also so many people that I find inspirational. So even I can reconnect with like such a community from my past now. Formula One team bosses are interested in venture, because they also have their estates to manage now, and some of the sponsors that were sponsoring me, the families behind, I can really reconnect so well with this new project now, and that's also cool.
It's so interesting for me because I started 20VC 9.5 years ago, when it really wasn't popular actually amongst that swathe of people, and now I definitely see it just permeate every industry and every family office group, corporate. It's amazing.
It's one of the main reasons why you can have a show like this. Genuinely, because you've got so many people in and around the space who are interested in it. They've got the means to do it. They just need a lot of the access. But I guess
venture is an access class and not an asset class. Is that a good one?
Come on! Yeah, baby!
Nailed it, right?
That's a perfect one.
That was not bad.
That was very good. I like it. I haven't heard that either. I'm going to put that on the deck. No. Very good. Mic drop. Poof. Do you think family offices today have the access?
Well, it depends. Some of the...
But like European family offices today feel that they can do venture on their own and they can pick managers.
Yeah, so here's where my whole project comes into play, because what I have found, especially in Germany, is that it's really... they're far from where they could be and probably should be. When you look at Yale endowment model and the allocation they have to venture, which has been their best performing asset class in many ways, then the European families in general will be very underweight, and that's where there is an opportunity. They're very strong in private equity, big allocations, but venture super underweight, and that's where I'm coming in now and building that together with some of my dearest family office. How would you say, colleagues from...
I think the thing that worries me most is often private bankers in particular in the last few years have taken them to some of the largest multi-billion-dollar funds who have performed badly. And then those families go, oh, well, venture's a bad asset class.
Sure, yeah.
And it's not, it's just a bad curation of managers.
Sure. And that's another reason that I think European families don't really understand the opportunity in venture when you play in that top quartile, top decile. Some of them have been burned and haven't put the effort in to understand the opportunity.
What's the goal for Rosberg Ventures then moving forward?
The goal, so this fund of fund is like a strategy which for sure will continue for a long time, but it's also building stone into others. Yeah, once you've established that, you can make your own direct fund, but that's still to be seen. It's a future step.
Have you had to learn a new language, a sixth language?
Sure, yeah. I need to now start to speak in venture language, but I'm getting there. I had the churn before.
20VC.
Remember the churn, and I'm listening to 20VC all the time. Yeah, so I'm getting there. But it is a new language that you have to learn, yeah. And you have to master it to be taken seriously if you don't know that language.
Do you really want to scale AUM on the actual fund size when you actually think of the fund size?
Yeah, no, the opportunity set is always going to be small in the best funds out there. Sometimes we're fighting for 3-4 million allocation, even less sometimes. So therefore, surely you will not be able to scale this fund of fund structure going forward in a big way. I'm pretty sure.
And this is fresh news, right? This is something that you've only just...
Well, it's since last night, really. So it's fresher than that is not even possible. It's been in full stealth mode up to now.
First fund investment going out?
Yeah, going out in the next days.
Exciting.
Yeah, and it's a 75 million fund size. Yeah.
75 million.
Yeah. And we closed at the first close 30 million. So we had a super traction on the first close already.
What do you think the role of that athlete investor is in this day and age, where we see so much more of the transition between sports and investment?
Yeah, sure. There's an opportunity. First of all, we have a huge reach that we bring to the table, which is also relevant to startups often. In the end, you also want to engage in projects that are fascinating, and we can bring that whole platform of sports to venture also, and so many people will enjoy spending time in our space and even networking in sports. There's a lot of crossover there, so which is what you're doing. Yeah, exactly. You're building that as well.
Exactly.
You're bringing now sports to the table of 20 VC, which is very exciting as well to watch and to follow.
Quick fire?
Yeah, let's do it.
You go first.
Who was the best person that you had in your corner during F1?
My wife. You'd start with that. Yeah. Then I would go to my engineer. Yeah, probably. My engineer. And then I would even go to my mental coach, because that's powerful.
What was the favorite location to race in?
Depends. The whole thing had to work for that. So Monaco, you'd say no, because the whole weekend is such mayhem. Just to get to the track is so chaotic. Like
the city is like shut down.
Just
right?
mayhem. Yeah, and so you're trying all.
For residents, you can't stay.
Really. Yeah, a lot of residents will leave. Yeah, but you're just trying the whole weekend to try and keep focus and stay away from the mess and the noise, and it's so hard. And there's so many sponsor activities that they drag you from one to the next all night long, just before the race or just before qualifying, even in the mornings. First thing you do, you wake up, breakfast, sponsor appearance before qualifying. So you wouldn't say Monaco. You would say, where would you go? Honestly, even something like Bahrain, because it's a great track. Yeah, it's very much focused on the driving the weekend, because there's not so much sponsor interest, and so potentially even something like that is then the most enjoyable weekend as a whole, where you can really focus on the driving.
You could have driven for one team that you didn't drive for.
Well, that's easy as Ferrari then eventually, yeah. But I drove for the other most legendary team, which is Mercedes. So, and I'm German, Mercedes German, it doesn't get better than that. But in my heart, there's a lot of Italian. All my best friends here are Italian, and it's my favorite language to speak in and to hang around. Italians is probably my favorite kind of community. So that would be the other one, Ferrari. That's which is how I then understand also Lewis's move. Yeah, he's done Mercedes, he's done all the success there, and to finish the career at Ferrari is, obviously has appealing. Yeah.
Other than Lewis, who's the best driver you think you drove with?
It has to be Verstappen, easily. Yeah, because he's very soon going to be a top 5 of all time. With Senna, Schumacher, with Lewis, that's 4, and then the 5th one is Fangio. It's easy actually.
Do you think he will keep going for as long as it takes?
I don't know. He's already mentioning now that it's not going to be forever, but for sure he has many, many more years in it. Especially, at the moment also, it has become, I think, a little bit easier currently for him, because there's no teammate that's threatening him, because he is so fast. It's not the teammate that's slow. And his car is so great. So those are obviously the most enjoyable times then in F1, where you're so dominant and can win all the time. And because when he was fighting Lewis, the first comment after the championship was, if it continues like this, I'm not going to be here for a long time. Because it's so intense, it takes a lot of fun out of it.
So dominance is good for the driver, but not necessarily good for you.
Yeah, it's good for the driver. Depends also, you do want a little bit of competition, obviously, as a driver. So it's good, but it's generally good for the driver and not good for the sport. Yeah.
We mentioned pay caps earlier. Should we have pay caps on drivers?
I don't know. Don't think so, no. Why?
Because it would prevent people being able to be bought. You can buy the best team. Going back to, again, equality of fairness.
Not sure. They keep on looking at it, because of course the team bosses want to have caps on drivers.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah.
What would you have done if you hadn't been a driver?
So I had a place at Imperial College to study aeronautics.
So the physics side,
math and physics. Math and physics always came easy to me. So aeronautics, because that was another way to Formula One via aerodynamics. I don't know if I ever was serious about that, but I had the place, and I would have probably done that. Yeah, I don't know if eventually I would have done all the way to aerodynamics, but yeah.
What was the most lavish purchase?
I'm generally quite conservative in general. Like I don't splash out, because something I really enjoy also is my estate. Like really building the capital base now for the next generations. I'm really quite something that interests me a lot. So therefore you need to make sure you don't lavish too much on all these things, because that's going to really dampen your multiples over the long run. And so, I mean, okay, getting a new boat. There we go.
Great. You crash a car. How much does that cost?
Crash in a race. So because Lewis and I crashed, eventually the team made us pay for the damage. We had to sign a contract that from now on, if we crash, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, we pay for the damage. So I remember how much I paid. It was £360,000 that I paid for one of those crashes. So that was very painful.
But was that only?
So we definitely made sure not to crash after that.
Was that only if you crash with each other? Not
only if we crash with each other.
Final one. 10 years time, where do you want Rosberg Ventures to be, and where do you want to be? Like 2034, what does that look like?
Well, first of all, I want to have generated great returns for myself, my family, and my team and our community. That's key, which would go like to Amazon, to Jeff Bezos, customer centric, because we are the customers, and myself as well. So that's definitely a key. And then, just working with the greatest VC funds and founders out there, I think is going to be an exciting journey, and really positioning ourselves as a great firm out there. That would be super.
You want to tap out properly? Thank you so much.
Oh yeah,
it's been lovely.
Can I tap out?
Yeah. You start.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure again to be with 2 stebbings in one go. It's been an honor. Thanks for coming all the way to Monaco. Seriously, really a pleasure. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, everybody. Please subscribe to the show. Very, very important, right?
Yeah.
And leave a rating. Can you do that now?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So leave a rating, please. 5 stars. We really appreciate. You know what's missing? A chat function under some of these podcasts.